When you think about figures who have cast the longest shadows over history, Napoleon Bonaparte has to be right at the top of the list. In just a couple of decades, the man completely redrew the map of Europe, rewrote its laws, and really forever changed the course of modern history. Just look at this place. This is Napoleon's throne room. It just screams absolute power. And what's so staggering is that this is where he ended up, a man who started his life as a complete outsider, miles away from any kind of influence. But of course, this kind of power came at an almost unimaginable price. And that brings us to the big question, the real heart of this explainer. Was Napoleon a visionary genius who built a new world, or was he a ruthless tyrant who bathed that world in blood? The crazy thing is, the answer isn't simple. He was both. So, to really understand the emperor, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand the young, ambitious soldier from a place most of France pretty much considered a backwater. This timeline really shows you the sheer speed of his climb. Born in Corsica, he was an outsider with an accent that other people mocked. But then, the French Revolution happens, and all that chaos created the perfect vacuum for a man with his kind of talent and ambition. He proves he's a military genius at Toulon, he saves the revolutionary government in Paris, and by 1799, after a daring coup, he's holding the reins of power. It's an absolutely meteoric rise. And this quote right here, from a farewell address much later, it perfectly captures his whole mindset. He was always thinking about his place in history, about his legacy. He didn't just see himself as conquering land, he believed he was writing a whole new chapter for humanity, and he was the author. So he became first consul, but his ambition only grew from there. Next, we're going to see how he became the undisputed master of Europe and forged his own legend in the process. This moment is everything. In this incredible break with 1,000 years of tradition, Napoleon invites the Pope to his coronation, and then he takes the crown and places it on his own head. The message was unmistakable. My power comes from me, not from God, not from anyone else. But for all his famous battles, his most enduring legacy might actually be a book. Before Napoleon, French law was this chaotic, tangled mess of old feudal rules. He commissioned the Napoleonic Code, creating a single, rational legal framework for the entire country. And this code was revolutionary. It swept away the last scraps of feudalism, established legal equality for all male citizens, and promoted people based on merit, not on who their parents were. It emancipated religious minorities, and in the places he conquered, he even abolished the Spanish Inquisition. His supporters will argue that this is his true legacy, dragging Europe into the modern age. But here is the brutal contradiction. For all his modernizing passion, he was also a tyrant. The same man who preached legal equality went and reinstated slavery in the French colonies. He championed the ideals of the revolution while shutting down the free press, jailing his critics, and, in the end, declaring himself a hereditary emperor, the very thing the revolution had fought to destroy. And by 1812, the result was a continent under his command. As you can see here, the French Empire hit its absolute peak, ruling over 40% of Europe. From Lisbon to Warsaw, from Rome to Amsterdam, his influence was total. He was at the very zenith of his power, but it just couldn't last. Every great epic has a turning point, right? And for Napoleon, his came from overreach, from pure hubris. His downfall really began with two massive blunders. First, getting his armies bogged down in a bloody guerrilla war in Spain, a conflict he himself called his Spanish ulcer. And second, the most famous mistake of his entire career, the invasion of Russia. And what a catastrophic reversal of fortune this was. His grand army, once the greatest fighting force in Europe, marched into Russia and was just annihilated, not just by the Russian army, but by starvation and the brutal Russian winter. The master of Europe was now leading a frozen, catastrophic retreat. The human cost was just staggering. The Russian campaign alone is estimated to have cost up to 1 million lives on both sides. An entire generation wiped out because of one man's ambition. With his army shattered, his enemies sensed their chance. A massive coalition of European powers finally defeated him at the Battle of Leipzig. They invaded France, captured Paris, and forced Napoleon to give up his throne. His first stop? Exile on the tiny island of Elba. But if you think that's the end of the story, you don't know Napoleon. He had one last dramatic act left to play. In one of history's all-time greatest comebacks, he just escapes from Elba, lands in France, and the soldiers they send to arrest him end up joining his cause instead. He retakes power without firing a single shot. But his enemies were not having it. They declared him an outlaw and assembled their armies for one final confrontation at a little place called Waterloo. After his defeat at Waterloo, the Allies took absolutely no chances. This time, they sent him to Saint Helena, a windswept rock in the middle of the South Atlantic, thousands of miles from anywhere. That house you see there, Longwood House, that would be his final prison. And there, stripped of his power and his empire, he died in 1821 at the age of just 51. Officially, the cause was stomach cancer, though, of course, controversies about his death linger to this very day. So, after all the battles, all the reforms, and all the bloodshed, what are we supposed to make of this man? Decades after his death, his body was returned to France. His final resting place is this monumental tomb in Paris. It's a shrine that shows you that, for France, he remains this figure of immense national pride, an emperor, even in death. Which brings us all the way back to our central question. Was he the enlightened reformer who built the modern state, or was he a warmongering megalomaniac whose ambition cost millions of lives? The truth is, he was both. And that's exactly why, 2 centuries after his death, Napoleon Bonaparte remains one of the most compelling and controversial figures in all of history.